Good morning, Ando. How are you? Sure. I also invited Jeff. I'm not sure if he's going to join today. Do you know if he's coming as well? Okay, no problem. Okay, so yeah, I got your email with the discussion about potential next steps. So thank you for that. I guess I can just talk to you a little bit through where we are uh, from my perspective, and then you can tell me a little bit about what kind of happens next. So as I mentioned, we've had a sort of principal agreement to the style of the new app. There are going to be quite a few discussions, I think, about um, what the kind of format of each of the areas is going to be within the app. So obviously on the homepage, you mocked up lots of different options and ideas. So I think it'll be a question of just refining which of those we want to go with. I have the main agreement and thing that was most important for me was to get to this unified homepage so that the BXR and the Sweat users effectively see the same layout, albeit there might be certain content and things which would be paywalled so that you can only see them or you can only go into them and view more details if you are a proper member. So we have a system um, in the app currently, which can determine the difference between a BXR member and basically a Sweat member. So it's effectively a member and a non-member. So those will need to be carried over. But as long as we have a way of controlling, who can see what, and we can do that through the back end, I think we should be fine. They also like the theme adjustment for Abu Dhabi. So I think that's also confirmed that the layout and everything will stay the same, but there might just be certain items that are not shown on that Abu Dhabi side because they're not needed. But again, we can tackle that in the region selector of the back end that Jeff and Carrick will build or make adjustments to, I should say. Yeah, so directionally, I think we're in okay shape. I think but my main question, I suppose, is from your opinion, kind of what happens next. I think we'll get some comments back, more detailed comments back from the client about what they like, particularly from the new app. It may be that we adjust some of the styling of some icons and things like that to be a little bit more on brand, because I think they're a little bit generic maybe at the moment. But again, details like that, I think we can work out in that design process. For me, the main things next are going to be, mapping out all of the navigation pages, and within those pages, improving or refining some of the booking flow so that it is, updated and maybe a little bit more intuitive. So I think we could, in a way, I'd like for you guys to look at all of the elements of the app as it is currently. And you can feel free to propose changes to the flow if you feel that they are going to be, to benefit the users. As long as, of course, we're kind of, we're keeping the functionality. Uh-huh. Well, I think I mean, I know for a fact there are some which are sort of incomplete. They're actually not in the current app at all. Um, or if they are in the current app, they need to be looked at and basically changed. So one of the examples is if you were to look at the process of booking a personal trainer at the moment, it doesn't really work properly. So there was conversations about effectively the difference between the process for booking a class. So booking a class is quite easy, right? You choose the day you want. I mean, the filters don't work properly on the current app, but I think that can be changed. So effectively, you choose the day, you choose the location, or you can see all locations, and you're then given a timetable, right? Basically, which allows you to then to book. If you don't have a credit, you have to buy credits. If you do have credits, you can just book, and then you can on some classes, you're given another step, which is to confirm a position inside the gym. But the personal training booking and the what is going to be called clinic, and there's a sort of two or three basically um, services which are like appointments, so they're one-to-one, they're not classes. That all of those need to be reviewed because the process at the moment for booking them is a bit back to front, as I said. So what I would envisage is that it's going to be a lot more like you choose what you want first. So you'd say, I want a 60-minute personal training session. And then it gives you all the availability. You can then adjust it based on location. You can adjust it based on the trainer you might want to have. So you can basically, you can swap around the different parameters based on preference easily. And without, once it's kind of cached the information in from MindBody, which is real-time information, by the way, from the API, which is, for Jeff to do. That information is real-time and allows you to then, make a booking. I think that as an example, though, the same thing applies where if you don't have a credit, what does the credit purchase flow look like? Is different from the credit purchase flow if you're trying class, things like that. You can't, the credits you buy for classes can't be used for appointments, for example. So I think, that there might be a little bit of probably sensible for you to understand, and I think probably Jeff or Carrick can give you access to this, but to understand the way that the one-to-one things are structured, because I think that will help you understand how best to position the flow of purchasing and booking. But I'm also happy to work through it with you, explain what it is that we don't like about the current application. Well, in fact, if you want, I can show you now, because it's probably just as easy. Yeah, I can screen share now. 1 second. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I open the BXR app. So, at the moment, so my account, I have a BXR membership. So at the moment, inside the BXR side of the app, which is where I am now, and I'm not sure if you guys can see this because you probably are using a free account, you'll see that I have access to a handful of things which are not actually available on the Sweat side. So if I switch to the Sweat side, in this particular case, they happen to be advertising the same main thing, this Sunrise Yoga. And this is kind of my point about the merging of BXR and Sweat, and in some areas, because they're promoting the same thing on both sides of the app. It kind of just doesn't make sense to have it so separated. Anyway, if I'm in Sweat, I can see classes, I can see Sweat packs, I can see shortcuts basically across the top here. If I go to BXR, you'll see I have access to other things that we don't have on the Sweat side. So gym floor, member classes. So personal training is one example. So at the moment, you can see I have 0 PT credits at the top. So I couldn't book something even if I wanted to. If I now go and look through and find. You see, at the moment, I have to look at both. I can only look both at the same time, which is frustrating. The load, personally. I mean, at the moment, I'm not even getting anything right, but it's. Oh, I think, and I think I know why. It's because they've actually changed some of the parameters on the back end of the body. So the you see how I have a tier filter, tier 1, tier 2, that doesn't exist anymore. They've now something like that. So again, there are different layers based on what the end customer wants. But anyway, I think that the point of choosing the date first is wrong. I think you should be able to browse what's available. So either by trainer. So if someone says, "Oh, you must use trainer A," then you would go and you'd be able to look at trainer A's profile and go and book appointments directly that they have available. Or if you don't know and you just know which type of class you want, you'd be able to look at whether it's combat or, again, it's slightly changed, so the parameters are slightly different. You would be able to filter by the type of class as well. And then once you've kind of selected the class that you want, the next choice would be availability. So you then say, and you'd have a look, maybe a calendar that's similar to this across the top. Maybe you'd have a differentiator that tells you whether a day is available, whether there's a class available before you even click on it. So for example, all of these across the top, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 are highlighted white. If, let's say, that particular class and that particular trainer was not available on Friday the 10th, it would just be grayed out, so you couldn't even tap on it or something like that. And then, of course, once you then select the day, it shows you the time slot availability. So most of these personal trainers will make a whole day available. Let's say it's from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. or something. And then you can book 60-minute, 90-minute slots from that time. Of course, when a time is taken up, that's no longer available for somebody else to book, that kind of thing. And so let's say I don't have any credits. I've then said, okay, I now know on Friday, I want trainer A, I want 60-minute class, and it's going to cost me 5 credits. I then need a really simple way to say, when I choose, basically book now and I want to confirm that appointment, I get the option to then go through the purchasing flow of buying the credits, which then brings me back to the checkout effectively. And I think this is something we've also talked about in other areas of the app, that we basically don't have a basket as such. It's effectively you have to go through the payment flow in sequence. Otherwise, the whole thing aborts and you have to start again. Whether or not that's the right approach, I don't know. It doesn't have to be done like that. There's no reason why we can't have a basket that then you make a purchase for that basket and it applies the credits to the account. I think if you were to look at some of the other pay to train companies out there, we can use this as an example. Let's see if. So I'd also like you to look at the login flow, because I think that ours is a little bit clunky still. There's a whole process involved. Anyway, if I want to, find a class and then I want to book, actually, let's just change to the right place. Otherwise, it's going to be confusing. Let's say I want to book on Thursday. I want to reserve. Okay, fine. There's a pop-up. We'd like to have that function at some point, I think. So we can have pop-ups in the app. You see, I can select my spot. And then here is my option to then purchase a pack or credits. So then I can choose which one I want. Right, I want this one. Go to purchase. So something along the lines of this that's just like a little bit more it's just a smoother flow, really. And then obviously I get the payment options at the bottom. We're not going to do PayPal, but credit, debit card, or Apple Pay. Again, a lot of the work on this sort of back-end stuff has already been done, but the appearance and flow of all of it is a little bit kind of jumpy. So then that would obviously apply the credits. But this is where I kind of mention the basket and showing you kind of what you've done. Because in theory, if I now go back and I say, actually, I also want to buy 12 classes. I'm sorry, if I go to class pack, let's say I want that one. Now I have in my basket, after I've accepted, you see, I've got the ability to buy two things. So something like that would be helpful, I think, to have a basket. Just because, there are scenarios, just like I've cited, where, that kind of thing is possible. I kind of like also, up here they have a filter, so you can filter by studio quite easily. You can filter by the instructors. I quite like the fact they've got, pictures of instructors, so that helps identify who it is that if you've seen that trainer in the gym. Oh, okay, they do this particular class. Okay, I want to see all the classes that Kendra does. We don't do stuff like theme things, but basically they have two different types of class. So there's kind of, I just think the way that we offer filtering at the moment in the app is very robotic and kind of quite flat and not very easy to get around. This is lots of more variables. I can say, okay, I only want to see classes between 3 and 8. Okay, fine. In this case, they're none, right? But do you see what I mean? It kind of helps you understand if I specifically want to ride with Kendra, as I make my filter changes, it's adjusting at the bottom how many classes there are for me to book, right? So it's all about the improving what you can see as an end client, so that you can drill down on the real result that you want. So that's kind of the sort of thing that I'm talking about. I mean, that's obviously more within the sweat classes, right? So, again, we've kind of got it like this. You do have your filters at the top here, but maybe people like that the filter, it's almost taking up quite a lot of real estate, having all of this at the top. Perhaps, we could hide the filters behind a button like they have on the SoulCycle app. And then you can go in and do your adjustments. And at least while you're fiddling with the parameters, what the output is going to be. So maybe we can apply the same thinking to the to personal training as well. What else do I want to note? Yeah, clinic appointment at the moment is nothing, but this will basically follow the same flow as the personal training booking. Yeah, I think there's quite a lot we can create, quite a lot of kind of similar feeling flows that at the moment are actually quite different based on what you're trying to do. I think that there are areas also that the client mentioned this the other day, that the reason we want to split out the purchasing of things for treatments and for classes is that we're kind of running out of space in this area. It's now a very long page. So, for example, the sweat packs, intro offer Singo classes, sweat packs, fine. But then you would have, lab would be somewhere else, memberships would maybe be somewhere else. Just it helps that part, that approach. We're almost making people buy credits before they know what they're getting, if that makes sense. So I just think it needs a little bit more of a holistic review of the purchasing flow and the booking flow now, to be more in line with, maybe how others are doing things. Let's look at another brand like Barry's. Oh, I don't have it downloaded. Let me just have a look and see if I can get this to work. Do you have any questions so far, guys? Okay, cool. So actually, our app is probably a little bit more like this at the moment. Browse schedule, again, you can see that what they're doing is they're pushing filters into a sort of an area behind the scenes, rather than having all of everything front and center, which gives a lot more real estate for the actual booking process, which I like. They have a memberships and credits section under the purchasing flow. So again, we can look at maybe improving the way we're doing that. The way that we're showing it at the moment is all a bit jumbled. This goes across, which I like. Makes it easier, I think, to see what's possible. They have a loyalty program. We've been talking about how to introduce a loyalty program. At BXR at the moment, we have a fitness tracker, which just tracks how many classes you've done. Not much more than that at the moment. I think there's some elements in here that we could maybe look at kind of taking as well, or thinking about how they're doing it. What was the other one that I wanted to show you guys? I think it was Third Space. So this is much more premium. So this is definitely the kind of look and feel that we want to go with. Again, we can't actually get into this one without being a member. So let me just see if I can find the other one we liked. What's it called? 7. So this is another one that we like the appearance of. So in here, book a visit. I'm not such a fan of this kind of calendar approach, but maybe it has its uses. Here you have a little bit about coaches, so you can learn about the trainers. So maybe there's a bit of a way we can, we can look at this as well, of how that part of it's done. Well, it doesn't seem to be loading very well. You get the idea. Schedule. Again, they've got some ideas here around what that might look like. Again, they've shown credits and stuff. There's many different ways to think about how this can be done. I think it's probably comes down to sort of looking at some of these ideas and making them what you guys feel is sensible. But I think for me, the new brand approach is nice. I just think let's look at trying to maximize usable space, because I think that's where at the moment we're not capitalizing on that because of the way the app is currently structured. So those would probably be my main comments. Okay. Of course. Yeah, no problem. And as I said, maybe in the first instance, you could try, mapping out a couple more pages, maybe some that have some more technical elements to them, and we can look at those, next. I think that a lot of the pages probably will be quite straightforward, and they're just content-based stuff. They're not very technical and don't have lots of navigability in them. But yes, that would be my thinking there. Sure. Mhm. Yep. Okay. Sure. Yep. Okay. Yep. Okay. Yeah, if you feel that is better. What I think I want to just avoid is going into too much detail of the design with the kind of new with the new style, until we get the functionality flow correct. I mean, I don't know how much more work it is if you do a wireframe, if you will, of a certain page first, or if you just go straight into doing a design of that page with all of the branding on it. If you tell me that it's not much more work to do it that way, then fine, we'll do it that way, because it means I get a much clearer representation of what we're actually going to get at the end. Um, but what I don't want, as I said, is to spend a lot of time on the design work and then have to do it 2 or 3 times over. Unless, of course, you're giving me a fixed price for the design, in which case, that makes it easier to do. If you're kind of baking in the fact that we're going to have to maybe go over some areas a couple of times, that's also okay. So maybe that's where it'd be useful to understand how you feel it's best to do it.
She wanted to entertain us. And I raised my hand and said, stop this. What are you doing? I should have to think. She said to me, I know what.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I don't. Yeah, sure. That's my point, right? Is I guess if you were to, basically prepare a proposal based on what I've told you now and kind of how we want to do it overall, I guess what's going to happen is, as part of that overall process, those pages will get created anyway. So, it's fine. I guess my point is, as long as we then have the bandwidth within the proposal to amend those pages and say maybe this doesn't quite work and this is why, without it costing us more money, then fine. I guess what I don't want to do is, I know what it can be like with design is that it can be a little open ended sometimes, and so to control the open endedness of it up front is sometimes more useful. You got to remember that any cost that you pass to me or that we agree, I obviously have to get agreed with my client. And so we need to be really clear if they do want to make changes, how that works. If they don't like how we approach it the first time, they may say, okay, we need to do this again. And it may end up that we need to do it a third time. Who knows, right? It's one of those things that um, we just have to have a clear understanding of how we will operate going forward, um, to avoid any conflict later. Um, that's all I ask, basically. Sure. Well, I think a couple of the ones that I mentioned. So I think, the booking flow. So the way one would make a purchase for a class, similar to the stuff I've just demonstrated, really. So for a class and maybe one for personal training, if we were to just do those two flows first, that would be ideal. And then I think, once we kind of have those under our belt, everything else is more or less going to be a kind of copy and paste anyway. Because it's as I said, the approach for purchasing personal training and booking is going to be the same as it would be for purchasing and booking a clinic appointment or a labs appointment, kind of stuff like that, right? And all of the classes follow the same process that the classes flow follows. So I think if we have those two flows established, that will allow us to really move forward quite quickly. In that meantime, we'll also have some comments probably back from the customer about what they particularly like from the new designs. And so that will help us to kind of build out, basically the main areas of the app are the homepage and the booking and purchasing flows. So if we get those two things right, everything else is almost, in the background, right? So that's my thinking. Sure. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Okay. And if you could, well, would you be able to estimate how long you think that would take to design these two flows that I talk about? I mean, you don't have to give me an answer now, but if we can get it, okay, fine. So if we can get an estimate first, then I can get that approved, and we can start on that basis to begin with. And then, as I said, once we kind of, I mean, I don't know how many days it will take to produce them, but let's assume it was able to be done by the end of this week. Then that means that by that point, I will also have the feedback from the end client on what's been done so far, and we can then, start working in earnest on the rest of the project. And obviously, we are. I'm not under time pressure yet. We do have time, but I want to obviously get this as quickly as possible, because then, of course, Jeff and Co will need, wireframes, or sorry, will need the designs to be able to then reskin the application. And it may be that we also end up doing that in phases. So as you guys complete sections of the app, Jeff will also then be working in the background to integrate those as well. So there's, I hope in a way you can create a bit of a kind of a conveyor belt, if you will. I suppose another sort of question I have for you is, you're obviously doing the designs in Figma, which is fantastic. Are you envisaging that there will be a navigable render of the app, kind of like I think you did now, but I can't remember whether it has clickable areas, but to see kind of how it would appear on screen, and then you can navigate through the app. Is that how you guys prototype normally? Yeah, perfect. Okay, so then that's fine. Cool. Yeah, so if we have that, we can click through. Yeah, great. Okay, and that's fine. That's that's a workable way then, because then I can basically sign off pages or areas as we go, and that allows Jeff and the other guys to build the functionality to match and to link up with the front end. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. So next steps, I think, is if you want to either estimate or just give me an idea of how long you think it will take to do these additional pages, I'll get that approved. You guys can start work on that, and then hopefully, as I said, we'll get some more feedback from the client along the way, and then we can start to think about the rest of the application. What would be helpful in that estimate that you give me for the overall build is to segment areas of the app into hours of time and effort, basically. The reason being that some of this work is basically considered new work for to the clients. So they're things that it's additional money they will need to pay. So we've costed at the moment for them to have a reskin of the application, but it doesn't include building out new functionality. So I may have to ask you, if it's too much work from this first instance, then fine. But it may be that if I say to you, right, this section that they want to do, what is the effort from your side to design it? Because then I'll be asking Jeff to do the same. And then that allows me to cost those individual components to the client, so they can see that it's extra on top of what they're basically paying for already. Does that make sense? So yeah, as much sort of itemization as you can would be great. Okay. Cool. Great. Then I think sorry, didn't mean to disconnect. Yes, so I guess if you guys can produce that information as soon as possible, let me know, and then I'll get it signed off and we can get going. Yes. Perfect. Okay. Thanks very much, guys. If you have any questions along the way, you know where to reach me. So just let me know. Okay. Thanks so much. Speak soon.
Thank you.
Bye bye.